So many of you have seemed to really enjoy my Rathgricy journey so far. I got my runes, I got some things started, but there's another really important component of putting her together, and that's the weapon. Since I had bought the BCC box that gave me the +10 and a +12 sword, I had already decided that I was going to leave one as a full backup in case of full disaster. So because of that, I decided to work on the +10 and leave the +12 alone completely. The BCC box also provided 5 of the Arrogant Arbiter supply boxes. You have a random chance of getting a sword up all the way to level 12 just from opening one. It could be for anywhere from level 4 to 12 though. So our refined method and what we decided to do is work on the best refined sword available at a time. So what this means is I worked on the 10 a bit until it broke down, and then I worked on any other sword pieces that were high until they broke, and then eventually I would use them as fodder. Ever since the overhaul of the refined system a couple of months ago, you can use this system with save points for safe refine or also for repair. I'm not sure how many use it this way, but it is a pretty decent method. In this case, I wasn't going to safe refine these swords. They're really, really expensive, and I could still craft some more and, still kind of go for it for a bit and see what happens. Now with this method, when you repair, if it's basically a repair with an extra refine, or even if it has an extra slot, you get extra repair points. Using these repair points, it kind of gives you, kind of a second or third chance to refine up, these weapons. Something I had forgotten to do early on was put away these sky fire shards. So I did pause to put those away because I didn't want to use it on this. I did a lot of back and forth deciding whether or not I was going to buy more of the BCC supply boxes or if I was going to craft. I had decided to do a little bit of a mix of both. At first I got some boxes, worked on those swords. Eventually I went to craft to use those things as repair, but I did refine them first just to see how far they would go. Of course, we all know based on my live streams and other videos how much I really like refining, right? Refining is definitely just one of those super frustrating things that, when it's not going well, it just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good at all. Either you're using more Zenny or you're using more BCC. You're just using more resources that you wish you just didn't have to. But it is just one of those things that is simply just a part of the game. In most cases, I do try to snap my 15s or my +10s, anything of that nature. But in this case, I didn't have the resources to snap a +15 sword, as it was about 1.5 billion on release, on Rathgricy's release. After not having too much luck with some of these supply boxes, I decided to start crafting. I did try to prepare myself with buying supplies off the black merchant ahead of time, but eventually, as we find out, you can't account for everything unless you super prepare, as I didn't account for all the materials, unfortunately. Crafted swords, I did bulk refinement to make them all +4, and then I went through the same process all over again. I refined them up, see how far they would go, if at all, and then on until eventually I would work on the swords that I had on hand, use what I had as repair, and see what happened. And for my Iridicon stocks, I had already pre-farmed this Iridicon myself. I have some other plans to refine some other things like accessories and all that, so that's also why I had a lot already prepared. And I had decided to just hang on to this Iridicon until after Rathgricy's release, and at least get this out of the way. And also see, how much I go through, if I eventually had to go through the whole stock that I had available. That's another thing to prepare for when you are refining. It isn't just the Zenny, it isn't even just the weapon. You also have to have the other metal and materials in this case. When I'm farming for Iridicon, I usually go to Royal Hunting Grounds. Sometimes I also kill the bats in the Komodo map. But either way, I just don't want to be fighting for Ridicon when I need it. Once I went through a lot of materials, I went back to try and craft some more, but I was out of lava gems. As I found out, I was not prepared for the lava gems. I was actually kind of surprised at myself. I had a list of materials and I don't know how I missed that. I just decided to check the lucky shop, see if, because I knew I had seen them there for the day already. But I decided not to spend my eating coins there. I went ahead and checked some other resource points to see, you know, if I don't have to spend the zenny, I'm not going to. You know, there's a lot of ways to get some extra resources these days in a couple of little areas of the game. In this case, I have a lot of excess of rift material pieces. However, as I was going through it, I realized that I was out of the specific material that holds lava gems. As I was trying to see if I could get any in this manner. Luckily, we do with the black merchant. So I went to the one in Alberta, since I don't want to be possibly stuck in Prontera, as sometimes there is that loop of going around that. There's the fabled Prontera loop, as we call it, where you get stuck. Got enough for another 20 craft, and then headed back to it. And you really just have to just ride it out. You know, I think the one thing that a lot of players may not do is set a budget for yourself. So like I said, I make sure like I have my own Iridicon already farmed. I don't have to go look for it. You know, that's already part of my budget. Like that's the Iridicon I have available. If I go through that stock that I have, that's it. You know, I'm going to, you know, the plan for me is that I'm going to farm more, and then I would try again at a later point in time, which I have done for other gear in the past, instead of, you know, being stubborn and purchasing more and possibly just being more frustrated over it. It also goes, you know, for something like this that is a very expensive weapon. You know, it's like a 5 million per sword weapon right now on global exchange. You know, it doesn't feel good to feel like you have to buy, you know, especially if you are buying it. You know, that's why I try to prepare like the craft materials ahead of time, especially since the materials were going to be going up after Rathgricy's release. So, you know, I did try to prepare myself as much as possible. Of course, you can't account for everything. At the end of the day, you're still, you know, at the end of the day, we're still beholden to RNG. After not having much luck with crafts again, I decided to get some more boxes from the store. See what we can get. I got a lot of mid-tier refine ones to work on. I did get a couple 8s. I think earlier I had gotten a 9, but it is a fairly decent option if you simply didn't have the things available and you do have BCC available. Goes the same process again with trying to get my crafted swords as high as possible and then work on them. And during this refining and in hindsight, it's kind of crazy that I just really did not have any luck with this already pre-synth weapon whatsoever. And maybe something else to touch upon is, does she need her weapon? In my opinion, her weapon is definitely really strong for Rathgricy, simply because of her tier 5. Because of the passive of getting the feathers back so quickly, especially if she's stationary on the field, it just makes it easier to play as Rathgricy instead of just trying to run around or do circles, trying to make the class work. You know, trying to recover those feathers can feel a little frustrating in the middle of battle. The first week or so that I had her and I didn't have the weapon, it just felt completely different. Especially because when I test her on CBT, you know, there I have, you know, practically infinite BCC. So I worked on the weapon and I synthed it immediately, and she felt incredibly comfortable to play with the weapon and getting those feathers, even if I am just standing there on the field, as opposed to just trying to, like I said, run around, do circles, as that is the only other way to properly recover her feathers, is trying to, you know, you can't just be standing there unless you have this tier 5, basically. And of course, if you're running around, you know, you you can, of course, be recovering them more quickly. So even though I had the tier 5 when I'm in the middle of battle, if I use the spirit summoning and I know rough attack is coming up, you know, I try to make sure I get that, because I don't know the timer of the next feather. So I just start moving around a little bit. And trying to get that feather back as soon as possible. What's funny is looking back on this is just how the swords just wouldn't even go like past like 11 or 12. You know, as I go through the footage and everything, I go through minutes of all of this back and forth. It definitely was not the best. Not the best feeling. Then as I worked on and on and on working on this thing, eventually we went past the awkward point, went past the awkward teenage phase of this sword, and it finally hit 14, and I said, that's it. And the reason that I say that's it is that I do have the deposit for the best blacksmith in the world card. So that means that basically I have my fake 15, and I am perfectly happy with that. I am perfectly happy with my fake 15. I can definitely live with that. Which it is also a really good, you know, it's kind of like a good little, you know, ROM life hack to know about. You know, if you don't have to worry about that specific 15 anymore, then it's just really good. It's just a really good thing to not have to stress about this anymore. And of course, since I did hit this on the unsynth weapon, I did have to synth it, which I was totally not prepared for this whatsoever as well. I had to run around, get some other materials, go to the black market, do all kinds of stuff, getting everything back, putting it all together. And then of course I had to basically do it twice because I needed a one slaughter to, you know, synth another just one slotted weapon. So one thing that I did too was that I went, you know, I wanted to use some extra resources that I had available. I actually went over to Void Realm and I used my Sin Crystals to get the item that I was out of for the earlier lava gems, which is called Sand Tier. And I used these crystals to get some of these to help me with synthing and saving a bit of money. So, you know, what some people do is you can farm Sin Crystals every day without even touching the MVPs over in Void. And, you know, this gives you extra chance for resources. You can also use this to get MVP materials to resell. So if you didn't know that, you know, maybe this is something that you can try. The elites drop the Sin Crystals, and so to just the regular monsters. And this area doesn't take CT unless you are killing the MVPs. And then we go through the whole process of refining, synthing, working on this thing finally. I remember being so paranoid. I'm like double checking, rechecking everything, making sure it works. And I finally had my T5 fake 15 sword. Of course, I did try to get a better enchant on it. It's a coupon set that I got from the BCC box. But I also wanted to try a couple of, you know, weapon crystals, which you can buy with your enchantment crystals, and give it a shot. It didn't get me anywhere, but, you know, it's always good to give it a little try. It's always good to give it a try. I had debated taking the Sharp Blade 2 instead of the Morale 2, but I figured I'd keep the Morale 2 for now since I needed the Ignore Defense for the time being. Well, I'm still working on my gear and upgrades. But had it been a much higher Sharp, then I probably would have taken that one instead. Now with the 15 out of the way, I wanted to work on a couple of other things real quick, like some enchants, which didn't go exactly as predicted. The Scarment kept getting arcane enchants, so I decided to at least transfer it off, as it seemed like it was going to just keep haunting me, as an example. I tried working on some headwear and some other pieces for the time being. The next steps for me is getting my Nolans back up to craft my Poitata Star and, you know, and take it and take it back into instances. Of course, I have been using it as a DPS spec in the endgame instances and having a pretty good time with it. But there's always more to work on. How are you liking these videos so far? How about your Rathgricy journey, or what job are you working on right now? I hope you're enjoying my showcase of my Rathgricy journey so far.